Identity and access management (IAM) is an important domain, especially in the cloud. So to help us learn about this important concept, let's imagine a root user, or root account, which is the first account created when you sign up for any cloud service. Of course, there are many cloud service providers (CSP) such as Amazon AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. However, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to stick with Amazon AWS, as I am more familiar with the AWS platform. So, the root user or root account has godlike access to all the various services or resources within that cloud platform. Of course, resources are plentiful in the cloud, from access controls to monitoring to databases to compute to networking, etc. etc. You can refer to my many other videos on this channel on all those various services. But for the purposes of today's video, we will be focusing on identity and access control management. Now, when you first create an AWS account, you start with what is known as a single sign-in identity, aka the root account. And you generally log into this root account using a single-factor authentication, e.g. something you know. This could be a username and password combination, e.g. login credentials. Again, I won't go into the detail of multi-factor authentication, but you can refer to my previous video linked here. But in essence, a username and password is something that you know, e.g. in your head, and it needs to be mirrored with another factor. In fact, AWS best practice recommends that you use multi-factor authentication, e.g. another factor on something you know, such as something you have. For example, a physical hardware token or even a virtual token that you use on an app on your phone to generate some random numbers that you have to have the mobile phone for when you put your username and password in as the second type of challenge, e.g. multi-factor. Another common type of second factor is something you are. For example, using the fingerprint biometric ID on your phone or using your face scan to log in as a second factor. In addition to the first factor, which again is your username and password, something you know. Now, with the root account, you can log into something which is known as the AWS Web Management Console, which is the online dashboard to manage everything in your AWS account. However, AWS actually has two types of root account credentials. One is the username and password with the multi-factor, as just explained, and that's generally useful for logging into the online web dashboard. But for more advanced features and development opportunities, usually you can use the root account credentials type 2, which are access keys, which can be used to log into the AWS CLI command line interface and API-related functions outside of the dashboard to do more advanced programming things. Now, back to the root user account. In general, you can use a root user account to create what is known as IAM user accounts, which are individual user accounts to represent individuals, e.g. people. Now, one key note about the IAM user account, by default it has absolutely zero permissions, unlike the root account, and the idea is to move away from the root account and use specific IAM user accounts. And you can assign permissions or policies to these specific user accounts. In fact, you will have to explicitly assign permissions to these IAM user accounts because by default, unlike the root user account, they come with absolutely zero permissions, e.g. the concept of least privilege by default. So let's create some IAM users. Let's start with this first IAM user, which will be an important user which I'll explain in a moment. But let's imagine we also have another IAM user. And of course, these two users are wizards, so let's call them Wizard 1 and Wizard 2. Now, the reason why Wizard 1 is important is due to a keynote from AWS Best Practice, which says in addition to having MFA on the root account, it is also worth creating an IAM user with the admin permissions, which replaces the root account. And the root account should then not be used going forward, but instead the IAM admin user account should be used. And again, that admin IAM user account is that Wizard 1, which has the admin tag, which is here. At this point, it's also worth disabling any access keys or secret access keys inside the root account, and then logging out of the root user account and not using this going forward. Now, before we get more technical and deep dive into IAM policies and IAM groups and IAM roles, let's add another wizard, Wizard 3, to this equation. So now we have 3 IAM users, aka 3 wizards, which we'll call Wizard 1, Wizard 2, and Wizard 3. Of which Wizard 1 is the root user disguised as an IAM admin user. So now, as we build this scenario out and understand groups, users, and roles in the context of identity and access management, let's first understand what an IAM user actually is. An IAM user could be a person, e.g. the wizards, or an application. And each IAM user has a unique username and password, e.g. credentials, and these are used to interact with AWS services and resources. Now, let's discuss the concept of IAM groups. So in this analogy, we have three wizards who might do three different things, aka three different roles or tasks. And as such, each wizard would need different permissions, or maybe some of them will be the same, but nonetheless there will be multiple different types of permissions depending on the wizard. And this is the beauty of IAM groups, which is a collection of IAM users. For example, all the wizards that are wanderers, get it? Which in this case would be all three wizards, could all be grouped into the group known as Group Wanderer. But for the permissions in some of the other groups, not all wizards may be part of these groups. For example, Wizard 2 might be in the Wizard Hats group and Wizard 3 in the Crystal Ball groups. However, the admin might be across all four groups, although it's not recommended due to the least privilege rule. E.g., just because an admin can have admin privileges doesn't mean the admin needs the admin privileges in such scenarios. In addition to IAM users and IAM groups, there is one more IAM concept that I want to discuss, and this is known as IAM roles. Now, you can think of IAM roles in this analogy as temporary superpowers granted to any of the wizards if they need it. For example, the temporary role or skill of kung fu fighting or swordsmanship. The key exam technical takeaway here is that an IAM role takes precedent over any IAM group policies or permissions that a IAM user may have. However, it's a temporary precedent, and this goes back to the IAM group once the IAM role has done what it needs to do. And lastly, I want to talk about IAM policies, as these are very important. An IAM policy is a JSON document that allows or denies permissions to access AWS services or resources. And a IAM policy can be applied across all the three concepts we discussed: the IAM users, the IAM groups, and the IAM roles. It's much easier to manage permissions through an IAM policy, which is a way of centralizing permissions, which is great when you have hundreds or thousands of users and perhaps hundreds or thousands of servers, because IAM users can be grouped into IAM groups. For example, all the IAM wizards that are wanderers can be assigned to the group Wanderers, and this group Wanderers can be assigned the IAM policy, which gives all the Wanderers the relevant Wanderers permissions. So say if there was 1,000 IAM Wanderers, they can all be managed from one IAM policy for the group Wanderers rather than individually 1,000 times. And now, for any viewers or subscribers still watching this video at this point, here is a bonus exam tip just for you. There is a difference between IAM users and IAM roles in that IAM users have credentials, e.g. username and passwords, and maybe access keys, whereas IAM roles do not have user credentials, e.g. it's automated and generally used by an AWS service or resource to assume a role programmatically. And again, to recap the important point, an IAM policy can be applied across all three layers of these IAM users, groups, and roles. If you found this video informative, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if not already, to help support its growth. As this not only helps me know that you are enjoying the videos and helps me create more useful content, it also helps the YouTube algorithm push this video to more and more people so everybody can learn cybersecurity. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed the content as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you would like to see more content like this, it would be super fantastic if you could leave a like and subscribe to help support this channel's growth.